If you are still using wait for cooldowns, we need to talk. Today, I'm going to walk you through building a modular cooldown manager for your Roblox game. One that's scalable, synced with the client, and designed to handle modifiers, cleanup, and error proofing all in one system. That's all it takes to handle cooldowns in every part of your game. No repeated logic, no spaghetti timers, and full control from both the server and the client. This also replicates cooldowns to the client, so your GUI stays perfectly in sync and you don't have to rely on client-side guesswork. This is meant for advanced systems. We're not just setting cooldowns, we're covering modifiers, per player memory, automatic cleanup, and integration with abilities like M1, parry, block, and more. So let's not waste time. Let's break it down. So why go through all this effort just to manage cooldowns? Most of you already have cooldowns in your game. You probably wrote something like this: set a flag, wait a few seconds, reset the flag. It works until you have 5 different abilities, 3 ways to interpret them, and a GUI that needs to show every cooldown visually. And suddenly, every ability is managing its own timers, there's duplication everywhere, and tweaking one value means digging through 5 scripts. With a cooldown manager, you centralize all of that logic. One system, one pool. Whether you're setting cooldowns, checking if an ability is ready, or updating the GUI, it all runs through a single source. You also unlock real flexibility. You can apply modifiers, so items, gear, passives, abilities. You can dynamically adjust cooldowns, and if you want a sword that cuts M1 cooldown in half, that's just one line. And yeah, GUI syncing is built in. The moment the server sets a cooldown, it's fired straight to the client. Your UI is always correct, and no one's guessing when they can press a button again. Basically, if you want tight control, visual accuracy, and a system that scales with your game, you need this. It's clean, modular, and way hard to break. If this helps you out, consider dropping a like or a sub, and as usual you can grab the full code in the description through Linkvertise, but I do recommend you watch the full thing because I need to explain how it works and how to set up the GUI and everything like that. But now that you know why we're doing this, let's build it. And here's the catch: we're not just slapping timers in a table. This system will be modular, modifier friendly, and fully client synced, so stay sharp. And now the setup is actually very simple. First things first, inside of subscript service, you want to add a module script, name it Cooldown Manager. Then inside of starter player scripts, you want to add a local script and name it GUI Handler. And then finally, we need to do the actual GUI. So in replicated storage, you want to add a folder for remotes, add a cooldown remote, and then a folder for assets, which in here we'll have the frame that we're going to clone into our GUI every time we have a new ability. So I'll actually quickly show you how to set up the GUI. So start the GUI, add a screen GUI. Inside of here, you want to add a background. Inside of here, you will have a UI list layout. Now, what this will do is every single time something is added inside of this background frame, it will stack up infinitely like this. So every time you have a new cooldown, it'll just stack on top of the other one, and so on. So for this background, you just want to have it fully transparent, and this is roughly how I made mine. It's just on the side and it goes up, and you can play around with this, anchor it, make it whatever you want, but just leave this as fully transparent. And for the actual frame itself, we want to have the bar. This is going to get tweened down like this. So make sure that this is maxed out 1:1, and also make sure that this is maxed out with scale, because if it's maxed out with scale, then it will scale to the thing it's inside of, the cooldown frame. That's how we actually do the scaling downwards properly. And inside of here, you just want 2 text labels, and make the background transparency for both of these 1. And you can just name them time and name, and make sure they're named like they are here, everything. And this is just going to be the timer for how long's left, and it's just going to be the name of the ability. That's basically it. But now, let me actually walk you through the script side of things. So inside of script service, you just want to add a module script and name it Cooldown Manager like I've done here. And inside of here, we have a lot of things, and I will go through each one of these step by step. Let me just close everything. So first things first, you want the replicator storage and the remote folder, so we can actually fire to the client for the GUI. And you want to name the module the Cooldown Manager. So let me just rename mine to Cooldown Manager. And then you just copy this and you name the module this, because we're going to be storing stuff inside of the module. So here we have the player abilities table. So this table is so we can actually make sure it errors out if when you try to set a cooldown, you don't type M1 exactly, you type, let's say, lowercase m for M1. It will actually error, so it tells you that you made a mistake. If you don't do this, then it will just, if you type lowercase m1 like this, it won't error, it will just silently not work. So with this next function here, which is very simple and is what we used to check, this is how we actually make it work. So in here, it just checks whatever we put in. So for example, if we put lowercase m1 like this, when we are setting a cooldown, that will be the ability name. And it will loop through this table here to see if the thing we put in is equal to what's in here. If it's not, then it will actually error. And this is how we properly check it. Very simple, but must have function. Next thing, we have the base cooldowns and the cooldowns table. So as you can see here, we're actually storing it inside of the module. So we're doing cooldown manager.base cooldowns. This is so we can do self inside of the functions later, and I will show you that. And in here, we just store all of the base cooldowns, as you can see. So you can add as many as you want here. In here, you're just gonna have everything, every single cooldown. And this is only the base because we're gonna have modifiers and stuff. So you can multiply the base cooldowns by like whatever you want, or you can even add or anything you want to. So you can have custom cooldowns and everything like that. So just add every single cooldown here, and obviously it will get quite long, so you can just close it out. And down here we have the actual current cooldowns that are ongoing, and yet again it's inside of the Cooldown Manager module itself, and it's .cooldowns, and it's a blank table for now because we don't have any cooldowns. Next function is the get cooldown function, and I'll copy in the set cooldown function as well. So let me go through these real quick. So the get cooldown function, we need the player and the ability name. This is just to check if we have a cooldown on whatever the ability that we're looking for. And here's where we actually use the isValid function. So obviously first we'll check if there is a player, and if not, return end, return nil end. So we have to have a player, and it will error if not. And here we actually do the isValid function check. So if not, player abilities.isValid, so if not, this ability isn't inside of this table, then it will error. Right, and I'll tell you what the error is right here. And after the checks are done, we will just initiate a table for the player's .user ID if you don't already exist in there, and then it will return the cooldown that you were looking for after it's done all the checks. And this is where self is used. Self in this case just means the cooldown manager, so cooldown manager.cooldowns. And the reason we can use self is because we are putting these tables inside of the Cooldown Manager module itself. And to use self, you need to make sure this is a colon as well when you are setting a function. Next, we have the set cooldown function. This is the main chunk of the Cooldown Manager. As you can see, there are some other things here. You can check if you can use the ability. You remove all the cooldowns and some other extra functions that are not really too important. So this is the main one. Make sure you get this right. And let me walk through it. So obviously we need the player, we need the ability name, and the modifier. I'll get to the modifier down here, and it's very, very helpful. So same thing here, we do the checks with isValid for the ability name, and if not self.base cooldowns ability name, then it will error again. So if inside of base cooldowns it doesn't find the thing you are looking for, it will error yet again. But this is another check, so you can't make a mistake. And here we just initiate the table if you're not in there already, as you did inside of the get cooldowns. So inside of each one of these functions, if you aren't already in there, it will make a blank one for you, a blank table for you. And here we get the base cooldown and the final cooldown. So the final cooldown is because we're going to mess around with the modifiers, and the base cooldown is just self.base cooldowns for the ability name. So it pretty much just means the cooldown manager .base cooldowns, and then whichever ability you are setting in here or looking for. So if you type in M1 in here, this will be equal to cooldown manager .base cooldowns.M1. It will be equal to this, so 0.4. And final cooldown, we just set it to base cooldown temporarily, but we're going to change it inside of the modifiers. So inside of the modifiers, which we set in here, first of all, we check what the modifier type is, and if the modifier is a table, then we can change the type. So if the modifier .type is multiply, add, or subtract, this is how you can decide which one you want to have. And I will go more into this and show you when I'm actually showing you how to use it. So just stay ready for that. It will be not too long from now. And if it's not a table, then it will just simply multiply it by the modifier. And at the end here, finally, we just want to add everything that we just talked about to the table for the actual player. So we're going to add self.cooldowns. So this is the table that we have up here, which is just a blank table, and this is where we store all of the players and all of their cooldowns. So inside of here, we're going to put the player.user_ID, and we're using user ID, so it's very easy to find a player you're looking for, and you can't have any issues with that if someone changes their name or anything like that. And we store the ability name, and for the ability name we'll have a new table which will have the cooldown and the last time used. And the last time used is how we're going to track if you can use it again. We're not doing any loops or anything here, because we're just going to check inside of the can usability for the last time that you actually used it. And if it's past the amount of time that you should have been able to, then you can use it again. So no loops here, so it keeps it nice and performant. And finally here, we're just going to fire to the client for the GUI. And here we just send it through the player because we have to send through the player from the server as the first parameter. And then we'll put a table which will have all of the data. So we'll have the ability that we are sending through, and then the cooldown, which is equal to final cooldown, and ability name is the ability name. And we send through the player again so we can actually get the player over there in the client. I'll also come back to this and I'll show you inside of the local script and explain everything, so get ready for that. And finally, these other functions are quite simple, so I'm just going to quickly copy all of these in and go through them. I'll quickly go through these aren't very long, so I'll also close you real quick. So for the can usability, I'll move things down so it's a bit less confusing. So for the can usability function, as usual, you want to make sure this is a colon, because we're going to need to use self. And we just have the player and the ability name. And as I said, this just checks if you can use an ability or not. So same checks here as before in all of the other functions. And here we just get the ability data, which is the self.cooldowns, player.user_ID, ability name. So cooldown manager, not cooldowns, player, and then the ability name, which we were setting inside of the set cooldown function right here. So it just looks for this that we just set. And if not ability data, so if there is no data, then return true end. And this will just return the time that has passed minus the ability data last used, which is the time of when you first used it. This will actually return a true or false based on if it's true or false, because we're doing greater than or equal to the ability data.cooldown. So it just checks it if enough time has passed for you to be able to do it again. And notice how we're using ability data.cooldown, which is inside of the table that we had here. We're not using the base cooldowns because we're checking it for the modified cooldown if we had one. Okay, so this will turn either a true or a false for us. We can use it again. Very, very helpful function. And these other ones are less helpful, but they still have their uses. So removal cooldowns just blanks out every single cooldown for everyone. You can also change this to remove a cooldown for a specific person or something like that, but you don't really need that exactly. And if you did want to, it's very simple. You would just have like the player in here, and instead of self.cooldowns is equal to blank, you would do self.cooldowns player is equal to blank. So it's very simple, and you do want to make sure it's by user ID, so you get the user ID, and then here you just do like players user ID is equal to blank. It's quite simple. So next function, remove cooldown viability. This just removes the cooldowns for and yeah, first we'll do the check, and here we'll do a loop inside of the player cooldowns table, and for every player you will just remove the cooldown of a specific ability. This has its use cases if you want to have like a special ability that removes everyone's cooldown in your party. You can mess around with this and change things. These are just small helper functions. They aren't like very important to the main bulk. And just some other functions here for when the player joins and when the player leaves. And you do actually need to fire these. So cooldown manager dot on player join. You can just fire it here, or well, no, you don't want to fire this inside of where you handle all of your player joining and player leaving. So if you have like a server script inside of server script servers, inside of here you would just fire both of these when the player leaves or when the player joins, to make sure it cleans everything up nicely. And I can also show you that later on. So yeah, this is everything for the actual module, and the local side is also very simple, and I'll go through that right now. So this is the local script for the GUI. At the top, you just want to have these. You want to have the replicated storage, the remote folder, and the assets folder. Then you want to get the player's GUI, which the player's GUI is just the starter GUI. But when it's inside of the player after the game started, instead of it being called starter GUI, it's called player GUI. So it's player, well, wait for chart player GUI, or you can just do .player GUI. And here we get the cooldown GUI and the holder, which is the background and the frame itself. And you do want to make sure the frame is inside of the assets. I did take it out for showing you. So the holder is the background, and the cooldown GUI is the screen GUI here, the cooldowns. And if you have different names for your things here, you do need to change them inside of here. Then we get the run service for actually, scaling the bar down, and I'll get to that inside of the cooldown function right here. Stay ready for that. And we have a blank table here for the active cooldowns, and I'll show you where we use this later on. Now we're going to change the list's layout order. So inside of your background, you'll have the UI list layout. And if you don't want to have this here, you can just change it inside of here. Sort order to layout order, make sure it's set to that. Or if you don't want to, I mean, this does it for you anyway. So it's fine. Just a function to do that. Oh, and of course, if the UI list layout isn't in there, then it will warn. Now, this is the bulk of the local side of things. So the update layout orders is a function to update when you have multiple frames inside of it. It will update which one should be on top and which one should be on the bottom, based on whichever one you got most recently. Because normally it would put them above each other, like, let me show you. So normally it would put, oh, it's not inside of there. Oops, put that back in assets. So normally if you had two cooldowns, it would have put, let's say I pressed the equip one first, so this one, let's say I pressed equip first and then I pressed M2, it would actually move equip above it. But with the layout order, we're making it so equip stays below. So the newest one we get is always put on top. That's what we're going to do with the layout order. So in the GUI handler, inside of the update layout orders, we're going to have a blank table for the children. And this will be basically everything that we find inside of the background. And for everything inside of this table, we will get the children inside of the holder. And if the child is a frame, then it inserts it into the table. So it loops through everything inside of the background, and if it's in there, for everything inside of the background frame, it will add it to the children table. And down here, we just do another loop for another for loop. So for I equals 1, for however many you have inside of here. So the hashtag before this means the number of things inside of the table. So let's say you have like 5 cooldowns going on, so it'll be 4i, 5. So it'll go up by 1 5 times. Local frames equal to children I. So this is how we're going to do the actual layout side of things. So it will it's a bit confusing, but it will just layer them properly. and here it sets the layout order for the new frame that got added in there. And as you can see, there's a layout order number here, and it will set it equal to the number of children minus the index. So it's just a bit of math. It's a little bit confusing to explain, but this is the code for it, and this is it for this function. And the final thing I have to go over is the start cooldown function. And this one here is just very simple because it uses this function right here, and I'll just go over this one as the final one. But let me go over this one. So it is a little bit long, but don't worry, I'll explain it. First thing, ability name, and then the duration. So the frame we are going to get is going to be inside of the holder find first child ability name. Now this is only if you want to already have every single frame inside of here already prepared and you want them all to just be different. If not, then it will create a new frame. Well, it will clone the one that we have inside of here, and it will give it the stuff that we send in. So it'll give it the name of the ability, it'll give it the cooldown name.text of the ability, which is this right here, cooldown name.text. And for the timer, it's down here. I'll come back to that. And this is also where we do the update layout order inside of here. We'll fire that. Okay. So then we get the time label and the bar, which is both things that are inside of here. And we'll do some other checks here. If not time label and whatnot, same thing for the bar. And if it's not a frame, and if this one's not a text label, then return end, warn, and stuff like that. Then here we add to the table the active cooldown table that we have up here. We add the ability name if it's not in there. So if it is in there already, then we will disconnect it, so it will remove it and set it to nil. And here we check the time for when we first activated it. So this is pretty much the same as what we did inside of the Cooldown Manager module for storing the times inside of there, but for this one we're going to use a run service to actively update it, because we need it to go down every 0.1 second. We don't just need to check it again when we want to use the ability again. So this is to disconnect it if it's already passed, or if it's finished, or if it's already in there and we are firing it again, it will remove the previous one, set a new one. Here we check the start time. Well, we get the start time, which is just time. And here we do the function to update it, which is down here, and we're going to connect it to a run service in here, .heartbeat, inside of the update. And what we're doing here is we get the elapsed time, so the time that's passed. So that's time minus start time. And then we get the remaining time, which is a math.clamp, and inside of here we'll have the duration minus the elapsed time, 0, and then the duration. And if you ever want to know what any of this stuff does more in depth, you can just ask the assistant and say explain code, and it will explain everything to you, as you can see here. So I'm not gonna wait for all of that because I have to go through this quickly. And here we have the text label, and we will format it with all of this for the time that's left. And this pretty much just means it'll format to one decimal place, and this is the actual time that's remaining. That's what this basically does. Then we get the scale. This is for the bar. We're going to scale the bar down, and the scale on the x-axis, because that's what we're going to scale it on the x-axis. We are going to do remaining time divided by the duration. This is just some math to get the scale, and then we're just going to change the bar size by the new scale. So this will be the x, the y, and the x and the y again, but on offset. So scale x will become the new scale x that we have here, and the offset will not change. It will just stay as is, because we do not want to scale it on the offset. That's not what we want to do, because if you scale on the offset, it won't actually stay relative to the thing it's inside of, and everything will break. So make sure it's on scale. Very important. And here we just get the y scale and the y offset, which we're not changing either. We're just setting it to what it currently already is to make sure nothing changes. And final bit of code here. If the remaining time is more than or equal to 0, then the time label text will just be equal to blank. Then we'll destroy the frame and active cooldowns ability name. So if it's already in the table, then it will take everything out of the table and it will update the layout order again, because it will need to be taken out. So it will update the layout again to be proper. And as I said before, this is where we're going to connect it to the run service's heartbeat, so it can fire every single frame and check this every single frame, and basically it will handle absolutely everything. for the GUI, every single frame, so it's perfect. And the final thing that I mentioned down here is for when we're actually receiving it on the client. And what this is inside of the Cooldown Manager, inside of Set Cooldown, down here where we fire to the client, this is what we are receiving inside of here. So we're going to get this table, as you can see here, and that's the data. This is the table, the data. And the next thing is the player that we send through in here, and you can just ignore this one here because this is something that you have to send through. But this is what we're going to actually use. So the data is that table that we had, and the player is the player that we sent through. So if the player that we received in here is not equal to the player that we have locally up here, then return end because something's wrong. And then we get the data and cooldown time, which is just inside of our table. So it'll be data.ability, which pretty much just means this table.ability and then .cooldown, which in here we have them equal to the ability name and the final cooldown, which are just variables inside of our module. And we will receive them inside of here. We'll print the cooldown time so you know how much time is left. You don't need to do this. This was just a quick check I did. And then we just start the cooldown because this function here handles absolutely everything to do with it. And we give in the ability name and cooldown time. That's it. And that's how you actually handle everything locally. And yeah, that's actually everything for the script. All that's missing is that I explain how to use it, and I will show you that right now. So for actually how to use it, you can just add a script inside of, for me I added it inside of the workspace, inside of these two parts, just so I can test it out. So just add a server script anywhere, or if you already have like a combat system or something, you don't need to add a script anywhere, you can just add it inside of that. So let's go ahead inside of this part, which I added a script inside of. Now, I got this server script service here because I need to get the Cooldown Manager module, so I'll just delete this because I already have one. And in here we get the server script service to find the Cooldown Manager, and mod is the module. And to get a module, you just want to do require and then the server script service Cooldown Manager. And then all I do here is check if the part is clicked. This is just so I can actually test it. But here we actually do the checks. So this is how you do the checking for if you can do the ability or whatever it is again. So if not, module.cooldown-manager can use ability, make sure it's a colon so you can use self, can use ability, and the things you send in. So player, and then here is what I mentioned about the stuff inside of here. So the base cooldowns and the player abilities and stuff. And also I did forget to mention inside of the return down here, you want to make sure these are inside of here so you can actually get them from the scripts. So you return the player abilities, and that's equal to the player abilities module or table, and the cooldown manager, return the cooldown manager table. So inside of here, I'll actually quickly just show you how this autofills. So look, if I take this out, and for the can usability, what we need is, let's see, can usability, the player and the ability name. So for the ability name, you just do comma, and then you just do mod.cooldown manager dot, I think it should be cooldowns or base cooldowns. No, not cooldowns. It's actually not. It's not the cooldown manager. It's the player abilities. See, so it autofills for you now. It's the player abilities dot, and then whatever ability you want. And see, it autofills everything for you here. So either blocking, parry, equip, M1, M2. And if I add another ability inside of here, for example, dodge is equal to dodge. Look at this. Dot. It autofills dodge now as well. This is how simple it is. So now you can just do dodge, and it'll always be dodge. There will never be any typos or any mistakes. So I'm not going to check for dodge because I need it to be equip. So what this does is it checks if you can use the ability for equip, then return end if you can't, and if you can't use it, it returns end, right? And after that, we will set the cooldown because this is if you can use it. So simply you just do module cooldown manager colon, make sure it's a colon, set cooldown that we send through the player. And what do we need for set cooldown? We need the player, the ability name, and the modifier. So player module.player abilities.equip, as we said in here. And then this is where you do the modifiers. So I just set it as a nil so it doesn't modify anything. But if you want a modifier, you can either do a number, so 8, because inside of here we have it to, let me show you. We have it if it's not a table. then it will just multiply it by the modifier. So if you want the cooldown to be multiplied by 8 or by 2 or by 1.5, so the cooldown's 50% longer or so on, you can just put a 1.5 or a number here. But if you want this to be one of those types of modifiers, so multiply, add, or subtract, then you have to put a table. So now it's a table, and then we just put type is equal to one of these. So let me go back. Multiply, add, or subtract. So let's say I put add. Let's close you. So now it will be equal to the add. Modifier is equal to add, and it will add the plus modifier dot value. So then you do a value, and let's say 5. So now it will make the cooldown extremely long, right? So if I press play now, and forget which one it was, it wasn't you, it was you. Now you can see the cooldown is 7 seconds, and I can't click it again, doesn't let me. I'm spam clicking right now, and as soon as it's gone, boom, 7 seconds again. And you see, I put a new cooldown, I put it on top. New cooldown always puts it on top. New cooldown puts it on top. So yeah, that's everything, and that's how the modifiers work. And you can play around with these and have any custom modifier you want, and nothing should ever break.